As a kid, I used to watch Land of the Lost on Saturday mornings. And in that series, there was uh, some creatures called the Sleestak. And they were always the threatening monster, or one of the threatening monsters. And so I decided I'm going to revisit my childhood a little. So on eBay, I found this bust here of a Sleestak. And it comes with, of course, a Land of the Lost nameplate here. So I don't know who the manufacturer is, but we're just going to roll with it. Uh, I'm going to have to build a base for it, and I will probably use Sculpey to build a base for it to stand on or sit on, if you will, and accommodate the nameplate, something like this. So I think we're just going to call this a garage kit. It has, I see a little bit of seam line going on here that's going to be kind of tricky because this is made of resin, and resin's a little bit harder, a little bit trickier to work with. So, but, we'll see what happens here. So, Land of the Lost Sleestak. Let's get into it. Much like an injection molding process, I believe that in resin molding, you're still using a release agent, and that could get in the way of your paint job. So what I'm going to do here is squirt this down with Windex, wipe it down, and then squirt it down with water, and then wipe that down so there's no release agent residue that could mess with my paint job. Because this didn't come with a base, I needed to make one. So for that, I'm using a polymer clay called Sculpey. Now, to give this a base, well, to stand it up a little, I used a plastic fruit cup as a temporary stand. Wrapped that in aluminum foil and then built up the Sculpey in the shape that I wanted. Once I was done, I then removed the plastic cup because if you bake that in the oven, it's of course going to melt, and then put it in the oven. Now the instructions say to bake it at 275 degrees for 15 to 30 minutes per quarter inch of thickness. So I did 275 degrees for about 45-50 minutes. Hopefully that should be enough to get us where I need to be. And after that, I'll move on to probably a quick sand of this and then move on to painting. So the SD card I was using got full, so I did not capture everything. I've got some more SD cards now. So I primed this with first Tamiya surface primer in white because I wanted to get the white under the throat because I'm going to do a yellow later. And I also eventually, not at first, but later, masked off the horn. I may have to do some touch-ups. Now, for the rest of it, I used Citadel Color Chaos Black Primer. I've not really done much with that, so this is going to be an experiment. So I masked those areas off and then painted accordingly. So hopefully that'll make it easier when I'm applying lighter colors for the yellow and the darker primer for the green. On the base, I started off with a thin coat of the Vallejo Model Color Leather Brown, and I'm going to let it dry and see. I might need a second coat, although seeing the gray come through the brown, I may actually just leave it like that. I'm going to let it dry and then see where it's at. Next, I'm using Vallejo Model Color Pale Sand and doing a stippling technique with a very stiff scrubbing sponge. And the idea is that I'm going to tap the little sponge piece into the paint and then get a little bit of the excess off and then go over the base. And the idea is to get kind of some random coloration. And I will probably do this with a few different colors and eventually build it up to where it looks like rock. Continuing on with the stippling, I next used Tamiya Model Color Tan Yellow. And again, we're building up layers of color. And if you look at rocks, I mean, they look gray from a distance, or maybe tan or brown or even red from a distance. But then if you get close up, you'll see there's all kinds of little colors, and none of it's uniform or consistent. It's all random, as much of nature is. For the next stippling color, I'm using Vallejo Panzer Aces Light Rubber. To get into all the cracks and shadow areas, I used Vallejo Model Color Camouflage Black Brown, which is a really nice dark brown. And as I applied it, I then took a spray bottle and sprayed it down to get rid of the excess paint. So the next thing I did was to use some Tamiya buff to do essentially what I believe is called a glaze. The idea is that the paint is thin, so you get the underlying layers to come through, but not so thin that you're creating a wash, because I want to keep the dark recesses that I created with the dark wash I did earlier. So the next layer of color I'm adding is some more of the Tamiya buff, but this time I'm doing it as a dry brush to get a little thicker coverage. I'm using a cheap makeup brush. I've seen other people use that, and so I'm giving that a shot, and so far I think I'm liking it. So I wanted the letters on the nameplate to stand out a little bit more. So I mixed up some of that Tamiya buff with some Vallejo Model Color Cream White and went over the letters. Something I forgot to mention was that earlier on in doing the base, I used some Tamiya flat clear spray paint before I did the washes. And the reason for that is sometimes if you don't use a sealer of some sort, the washes can remove the previous layers of paint. And to protect those previous layers of paint, I used the Tamiya flat clear spray paint. I was looking at this and thought I was done, but then I decided I want a little more definition, and to make it more readable, if you will. So I took some Vallejo Model Color Cream White and did a little more of a dry brush with a soft makeup brush to give it just a little bit more definition and make it more readable. For the horn, I used a very thin base coat of Vallejo Model Color Brown. The eyes on the Sleestaks are a glossy black, so I happen to have Vallejo Model Color Glossy Black, and that's what I'm doing the eyes with. I will probably come back with clear later on, but right now this is a start. For the throat and for the horn, I went over it with a wash, which was a mix of Vallejo Model Color Tan Yellow and Vallejo Model Color Pale Brown. Continuing on, I did a dry brush on the horn and on the throat with a mix of Vallejo Model Color Tan Yellow and Vallejo Model Color Cream White. So the throat is more of a yellow color, and I'm going to build towards that. And to my mix of the Vallejo Model Color Tan Yellow and the Vallejo Model Color Cream White, I added Vallejo Model Color Golden Yellow to start working towards that gold tone. For the horn, I did some more dry brushing. I started off with a mix of Vallejo Model Color Cream White and Vallejo Model Color Tan Yellow. And then once I laid that down, mostly only on the base of the horn, and then from the top of the horn and blending down, I used just straight Vallejo Model Color Cream White. To do the throat, I tried using a dry brush mix of Vallejo Model Color Dark Flesh, Vallejo Model Color Golden Yellow, and Vallejo Model Color Tan Yellow. And then to bring out the highlights, I tried mixing that with some of the Vallejo Model Color Cream White, but I think I might have had too much paint on my brush and lost some of the shadow detail, so I may need to come back over this with a wash. So yes, I did decide to go back over it with another wash, again with the Vallejo Model Color Camouflage Black Brown. I'd lost all the recesses and shading from the previous dark wash, so I want that back before I go any further. So I decided to try a different approach because the dry brushing in this particular area on the throat wasn't working for me. So I happened to have some Tamiya yellow green, and I thought, let's try that. And so I used that, and instead of dry brushing, I lightly went over each one of the striations to go highlight those areas while still leaving some of the stuff from underneath. And that seemed to be getting me somewhere. And then to do some edge highlighting, I took some of the Vallejo Model Color Cream White and mixed just a little bit to do highlights, edge highlights. And I think that worked. So I think I've got this part to where I wanted it to be. So I started off with a base coat of Vallejo Model Color Flat Green with a lot of Vallejo Model Color Continental Blue, mixed in with just a tiny bit of Tamiya yellow green. Next, I did a dry brush. I was thinking of not doing that, but there was so much area to cover that I went ahead and decided to do a dry brush. And for that, I used the Vallejo Model Color Flat Green, the Vallejo Model Color Continental Blue, and the Tamiya yellow green. And I only did a little tiny bit of the Continental Blue and a little tiny bit of the yellow green. I did one more dry brush just to get the edge highlights. And for that, I again went back to the Vallejo Model Color Flat Green, just a tiny bit of the Vallejo Model Color Continental Blue,
and a little tiny bit of the Tamiya yellow green, but I added to that the Vallejo model color cream white and a fair amount of that because I really wanted to lighten that up to get those edge highlights. So, and I think it came out about where I wanted it. At this point, it's going to be a matter of doing the eyes and then touch-ups. So I wanted to go back and touch up the eyes, and to do that, I used Vallejo Model Color Glossy Black. Because I wanted to get the eyes just a little more glossy, I used some of the Tamiya Clear to get that nice glossy effect. So the last part of this kit was to attach the bust to the base, and for that I used the Zap-A-Gap super glue along with the Insta-Set Accellerator.
This Garage Kit's Sleestak bust is done. Now, it didn't come with a base, so I had to make one out of Sculpey. Not a big deal. It was good to get some sculpting practice. The figure itself really just needed painting, and did a variety of dry brushing, a little bit of washing, and various things to get it done. Anyway, so this guy is done. Not really a whole lot to say about it. I mean, it's not really a kit. It's just a resin bust that did come with a nameplate, by the way. Happy about that. So I do like the nameplates. So it's done. And I think I'm going to continue doing figures for a little bit. So that's what's next on the roadmap. So stay tuned. More adventures to come.